Hello everyone. I don't know whether any of you saw yesterday in The Guardian, there was a story about corporates, and they listed several companies that have now come out and are saying that they are making more money out of sustainability-based initiatives than they are out of their standard business structures. I thought that was quite interesting. We've heard lots of stories in the past about how we should be doing this. I've been working with corporates now for 20 years trying to get the corporates to understand that there is benefit in doing this. But there's starting to be some stories coming out. That is only the tip of the iceberg, though. And most corporates that we speak to, we've got a big group of organisations around the world that are working through the coalition. Most of them, the strategic teams and senior management, know when they're making decisions that there is something missing from that decision-making process. But there isn't a way for them to actually get that information around natural capital, around human resources, around human capital, social capital, manufacturing capital, into their decision-making process. And what they're doing is they're making it based upon a piece of paper normally that has some financial figures on it, and they're sitting there, I'm sat in many board meetings on the board myself, looking at this and saying this information doesn't connect with actually what I'm feeling about what we should be doing. How can we connect these two things up to actually help to make that decision better? The other fallacy I just want to throw away straight away is the case, the business case idea. I've only ever been asked for a business case when someone doesn't want to do something, okay, over 20 years. What happens is that someone comes up to you and they say, that sounds really good, but give me the business case and I'll consider it. The only other time it does come through is after you've walked down the corridor afterwards and everyone's patting each other on the back and saying, this is a great idea, how are we going to do it? Who are we going to get involved? What are we going to do here? Oh, and by the way, just put some figures down for me for the business case, will you? That's really what we mean by business case. So starting from a business case point of view, I think we've got to get that out of our heads straight away. People make decisions for many, many different reasons. When you go and buy a coffee in the morning, you buy that coffee because the type of people you know, the sorts of coffee you like, you go to the coffee shop you like, there's cost involved in that and many other factors as well. And when we make decisions at a board level, that's also what is happening in those board meetings. But we need to make sure there's the information for them to do that. So the coalition, I'm sorry this is out of date, it's also far too many organisations up there so you can't read any of them probably. We're now at 180 organisations around the world. I'm out in the US next week, 2 weeks time. The Department of Commerce in the US is signing up to this, South African government signing up. So we've got in this group here, we've got, first of all, we've got the NGOs. We've got IUCN, we've got WWF, we've got other organisations like that around the world, making sure that the need for what we're trying to do here is included. After that, we've got scientific institutions, we've got research institutes, universities helping us with this. We've got Stanford and the Natural Capital Project. This, once again, is global. We've got a lot of universities coming to us in the last couple of weeks, in fact, talking about how they can start connecting up their natural capital training programs through the coalition. So we've got the need from the NGOs. We've then got, with the universities, we've got the data, the information, the tools that might be used. After that, there's the businesses. We've got a growing number of businesses in our pilot program. We were planning to have 8 or 9 pilots for the protocol. We've got 50. We have to draw a line there. We ran out of resources. We've actually got 500 lined up to start in July. So there's a momentum growing here. It's not enough, but there's momentum. That's important. After businesses, we then got associations. We've got WBCSD, we've got BSR, other organisations that help to work at an associate level to try and connect up the sector, connect up what's going on, to make sure there's commonality there. That leads on to standard setters. We've got IRRC, GRI, SASB, CBSB, all involved in the process as well. So how do you start moving this into a standard setting? ISO has just recently started working on 14008 around natural capital as well. After that, we've got the finance institutions. So we've got Bank of New York Mellon just recently signed and joined up, which transfers most of the cash around the world. We've got other finance institutions, Natural Capital Declaration as well, which brings together lots of them working in that space. After that, you've then got the governments and the government bodies. So we've now got, as I said, the Department of Commerce in the US, we've got other bodies. DEFRA has been very actively involved from the very beginning, but we're also moving much more out of just the environment departments into others as well. The whole point of the coalition is creating a space where all of these bodies can come together at a global scale and start thinking about where they can work together. Okay? So it's not about competition, it's not an NGO being set up for life. It's about trying to find that space where we can get more by working together rather than working separately. Within the strategy, the protocol is one of the main things that we're doing. We will have a protocol, the first natural capital protocol, which will be available as of July this year, July the 12th. We've got a draft that's out for consultation at the moment. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. And we've also done 2 sector guides. The first is on food and beverage, and the second is on apparel. The reason for those is because there's a lot of interest in those sectors and we have funding to do it, but we've already got lined up another 5 or 6 sectors from different sector initiatives that want to take on future sector guides as well. And the interesting thing here is that we couldn't just produce a protocol, otherwise we would just have another piece of paper. There's plenty of pieces of paper out there in the world. What we want to do is understand how the protocol is going to be successful, and therefore from a coalition point of view there's other areas where we can come together and help to support that to make sure that people are picking up this and including natural capital in their decision making, as I was saying at the beginning. So the first of those is around data, and what we're doing there is looking at a framework and bringing together the different organisations I was talking about, not to talk about big data and all of that, but there's a framework here that needs to be agreed upon. What is good data? What is bad data? Where is the data held? When you're carrying out assessments, what sort of data do you need? Is value transfer enough when you're doing certain pieces of work? Or do you need to start looking at more proprietary data? Who owns the data? Who runs the data? Who sorts the data? That sort of information, we can bring together those different people, including the Dutch government, which are doing quite a lot in this space at the moment, and looking to fund some of this. I think that could be quite interesting. There's also the enabling environment work. I think many of you that have been involved in other initiatives around climate change, etc., will probably agree with me that we didn't really think about some of the policies. We started thinking about the science behind it, and that came a bit later on, and that caused a few issues. What we're trying to do now is have conversations, bringing together, once again, those different sectors, worlds, to start thinking about what are the levers of change, what is the complexity theory that fits into this. It's not always going to be a top-down legislation, it's not always going to be market-driven, but what are the levers that are really going to change? An example of that might be that in Europe, there's a lot of top-down legislation, maybe from Brussels, but when you get out to Asia, most of the businesses are family-owned. So there's no point going in there from a government level. What you want to be doing is talking to those business leaders. If they're family-owned, most of the next generation is just about to take over, has spent the last 10 years being educated at Yale, Harvard, Oxford, etc., and they're now going back and taking over that business. There's several places where they congregate. If we can get in and start engaging that community in a different way, that's probably going to have more traction in Asia and through Singapore than it would do us looking at the legislation. So it's understanding levers like that is going to be very important. The final thing is outreach and advocacy. When I started this, we had lots of different definitions of natural capital. We tried to do by bringing these groups of people together. We've got one now. I'm very pleased to say that what Georgina was saying earlier on, it's very consistent, and we've been able to follow that as well, building upon work that the Natural Capital Committee has already done. So we've got the Natural Capital Protocol, we've got the 2 sector guides. Developing these, we had a group of around 60 people from 38 organisations that came together, and this is quite unique. They came together under contract to develop something for a common good. I'm not aware of many situations where privately owned organisations and others will come together to do something for the common good in a pre-market space without government intervention in the first place. That alone, I think, has been very successful. The other point here is that we've got the big 4 accountancy firms working together and sharing information. Now, I never thought, after being in corporates for the last 20 years, I'd ever see KPMG, PwC, Deloitte, and EY all working together on an initiative like this. That's quite amazing in itself. So these have all come together. They're very much working as one team to try and develop this. And although initially there were individual roles set out, it's very much a collaborative process, and that's the whole point of this. It's about working collaboratively to do more than we can do individually. So I won't break this down, but this is the definition of what we're trying to do with the protocol. Our definition of natural capital does include renewable and non-renewable resources. What we're trying to do is a standardized framework. So it's a framework that everyone will be following, but it's not going as far as actually saying this is what you will have to do. A lot of it is about exploration. It's also, just to be very clear, it's about decision making. It's not reporting. We're not creating a reporting tool that will give you your scope 1, 2, and 3 as you did with GHG protocol. What we're doing here is helping them to think through what natural capital means to their strategy, to their business, to be able to include that in their decision making. What comes later on will be something like mandatory reporting, no doubt, or voluntary reporting. What comes later on will be how the finance institutions connect, and that's one of our next sector guides. We've also defined what we mean by measure and value, and once again I'm pleased to say we're building upon other people's work. The principles we've used in this are all taken, very familiar with, and put we're harmonising and standardising here. We're looking at impacts and dependencies, and lots of corporates that we speak to have a reasonable handle on their impacts. They're not so good at their dependencies. They're not understanding where the dependencies come within their supply chain, and that's a really important thing here for them to start understanding that. And obviously, it's about natural capital. This is the framework we've put together. It's not linear, even though we've shown it linear here. It's out for consultation. That's what this thing here means here. So take any pictures you want, but it will change if the consultation works, that is. It's a pretty standard management tool. I mean, any management decision making, the Institute for Chartered Accountants in England and Wales sets out 144 different management decisions. Any single one of them could fit into this process. It doesn't have to be about natural capital. It's about why you would do it, what you would do, how, and then so forth. What we've then done, though, is we've set out questions that are relevant for natural capital. And we spend most of our time trying to contemplate what those questions are. You can put underneath this social capital, human capital, whatever you like. This process would be the same. It takes you through a process to make sure that your decision-making incorporates something that isn't there at the moment. As Georgina was saying, we've got the stocks, we've got the flows as well. And just to be very clear, lots of the work that's going on, including the ISO work at the moment, is very much looking at the flows. What we're trying to do here is about decision-making across the whole process. So stocks are as important as flows as the value. And what we've done here as well is we've split this down to value to business or value to society. And we know that both of those are connected. But when you start looking at the tools and monitoring that you'll need, processes you'll have to go through, it's interesting to start thinking about it in those angles at the beginning and take that through. This is out for consultation again. We're starting to get some feedback, some very interesting feedback about how this works. We've identified several different applications about how you would use this. So this is what the different businesses would take. This is their objective of carrying it out. Now these are pretty common. Some of them are in quite technical terms at the moment still. I think we'll break this down a bit more. So the work I used to do in one of the corporates I was doing was very much looking at the total value of the assets and the asset classes, taken from very much a helicopter viewpoint. There's lots of people that are looking at site locations. There's people who are looking at product placement. But being able to identify that is very important. I said we've got 2 sector guides. We've also got, within that, 2 more that we'll be looking at in the next year. One of them will be how finance interacts with this. We've also got within that cement industry, the built environment, construction industry, forestry, water, and there's one more which I can't remember at the moment, that we're all in discussions with at the moment to discuss about how that might develop. There's an awful lot of interest, but we'll be working through sector initiatives again, not recreating the wheel. Some of the piloting companies I mentioned, those above the line, are going through the whole process. They started back in October. Some very big names you'll recognise there. The really interesting one for me here is Nespresso, which is that N with the line through it. What we've done with them is we've gone to Colombia, we're working with the government in Colombia. We're looking at how financing goes into Colombia, how the coffee industry is structured in Colombia, how Nespresso use the protocol and start understanding in the decision making, how that affects the other stakeholders, how that then goes on to others in the watershed, all the way through to NGOs and then up to government policy at the end. If we can see the flow of all of this through, that's much more important to the corporate than just understanding what their needs are at one point. It starts connecting up to the WAVES program at the national level, it starts connecting up to the scientists that are bringing the information through. That was the first one of those. We've got another 2 lined up to be started this year, and there's an awful lot of people that are looking at more funding to be doing that around the world. We're looking at one in Holland coming up as well. It'd be very interesting, I think, to do one of those in the UK. Those below the line are looking at individual steps within the protocol. These are only some of them. A lot of the companies at the moment know there's a problem and don't want to be publicising the fact that they're looking at it before they've started addressing it. I'm not so worried about that because I know that they're trying to work out what the problem is, how big the hole is, and what they can fill. They will then be going out to their investors and talking about it, but if they start talking about it now, we've got to have the investors there as well backing them. Otherwise, it starts becoming a compliance issue rather than a change issue. What we want here is businesses to change. Last final thing, consultation is already open. If you want to take part, please get in touch with us. All the information is on our website. We're doing it through an online, very transparent system. It's not an ISIL process. We're not doing the standard 90 days. I haven't got enough time in the timeline we've got. We're launching this in July. You look at the GHG protocol, they have at least 4 years to start thinking through. We've done most of this in the last year. We had a lot of building up to it, but that's, we're trying to address something big here. It will be a beta version. We need input into this. And we've also got an expert review panel, which has its first meeting later this week. There are around 25 people, very experts in their field. But anyone, this is open to anyone, including all the members who are taking part. We're doing workshops, webinars. The launch of this event, like I said, 12th of July in London. We're then doing World Congress in Hawaii. We're doing launches all around the world with this, with different communities. Thank you very much.